Hey everybody, Jay Schlansky here from the Fifth Trooper Network. I just want to take a moment to thank you for checking out this show. Did you know that over at thefifthtrooper.com we have tons of other content, including blogs, other podcasts, all kinds of stuff. In addition, if you want access to exclusive content, you can join us on patreon.com/thefifthtrooper and join at any level and you'll get access to exclusive blog articles, access to our private Discord, and much more. So please check us out, and thank you so much for all your support.
Welcome to the Notorious Scoundrels, a Star Wars Legion podcast bringing you the latest news, general perspective, and competitive discussion.
Hello and welcome back to the Notorious Scoundrels podcast. I'm Kyle. I'm here with Mike.
Hey, here we are. Another Monday. Another Legion podcast.
Another Legion podcast. It almost became a Middle-earth strategy battle game podcast.
It's not too late. It's not too late.
That is a game that I got into very briefly, like almost 30 years ago. Whenever it first came out, I bought the first edition starter set, and I painted probably 25% of it. Terribly, of course, because I was like 10 years old or whatever, but and then I haven't really played it since. and now they're coming out with a new starter set and
New edition.
Yes, which is accompanied by a new starter set.
Yep.
Which looks super interesting. And my daughter's she plowed through the Hobbit. She's super into Lord of the Rings right now, so but yeah, I think ultimately I can't do another game right now, but
yeah, you say that. I'm going to reel you in, Kyle.
I know. And there is a very strong community here in Northern Virginia, probably the strongest one on the East Coast, if not in the United States. So, yeah, I don't know. I gotta. Legion is a lot by itself. I definitely don't need another mistress, but it's calling me. I'd be lying if I said I wasn't looking at Lord of the Rings miniatures today.
Yeah. I mean, I'll be dabbling. That's for sure. I'm gonna dust off my collection here as we break out the new rules. I'm looking forward to it. So,
yeah, I found my one of like 5 miniatures that I painted back when I found my old Gandalf here.
Nice.
That I still have somehow.
Yeah. Time to cast some Sorcerer's Blast.
Is that what he does?
He does. It's actually pretty funny. In Lord of the Rings, you can actually knock over your opponent's miniatures.
Literally,
literally lay them on their side as you blow them back with a Sorcerer's Blast.
That's funny.
I think there's only a couple characters that can do it, and I'm actually not sure if like the knocking on the side thing is like still a thing. It definitely was like the last time I played it. One of the other things that you could do is like you could throw like a boulder with a troll, and it would roll through your opponent's stuff and would knock all their stuff on their side, and you have to like give up half your movement to stand back up.
That's fantastic.
Yeah. It's actually kind of funny. And you got like cover bonuses and stuff for like being prone and stuff like that. So yeah, I don't know. It's weird because we would never consider laying our miniatures on their side in Legion ever.
No, I mean I think miniatures games have realized that that's a situation that's better served by a token.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. It's certainly if you're trying to like preserve like the accuracy of the game state, yeah, probably.
Right. Yeah.
But there's something special about just turning your miniature sideways and laying it on its side, I don't know.
It's certainly thematic.
Yeah.
I don't know if I would want my opponent flicking my miniatures over, but
sure. Yeah, and it probably gets awkward once you get like I wouldn't want to be doing that with like Geonosians or
right. Yeah. Anything on a stand. Yeah. What happens if your Nazgul on Fellbeast falls over? Like I imagine there are some units that you just can't do that to. But
well, the way that works is that rather than getting knocked over, the mount would die or be removed from the game. And so every mounted model in Lord of the Rings, you actually have to bring a non-mounted version of.
Dismounted. Interesting.
Yes, so that once the mount is killed or the rider falls off or whatever, they proceed to play the game on foot.
Yeah, I did notice as I was looking through the product that every single model that had a mounted component also had a dismounted model in the same kit. So
Yes, yeah, which is like a pretty big deal because uh mounted models when you charge in that game, um if you're mounted, you get being mounted does a couple things. It doubles your attacks. And if you like win the fight, so to speak, it's
mhm,
obviously very different than Legion.
right.
Your opponent is knocked prone on their side, and they're considered trapped. So when you go to wound them, not only are your attacks doubled from charging, but your doubled attacks double again because your opponent is trapped and can't get away. So a model that would normally only attack with one die would attack with two when it's mounted. And then if it won the fight, it would then roll 4 dice to wound the target
Oof.
because yes. So um, and heroes like amplify that because they start with more than one attack.
Right. Yeah. So getting charged by a bunch of Rohirrim, bad news,
Oh,
basically.
it's super good. Rohan's like special ability in the last edition was when they charged, they got like +1 to hit on like or +1 to their strength or something whenever they're charging. So a mounted Rohan charge, real scary, man.
Yeah.
Anyways,
I'm hearing the Rohan horns right now in my head and getting goosebumps as I always do at that moment in the movie.
yeah,
Uh,
man. Now for Wrath, now for Ruin, right?
yep. That's right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
oh,
Um,
so good.
anyway, speaking of charging, we are going to talk about Legion units that charge today.
Yeah,
They don't do it nearly as well
unfortunately,
as the Riders of Rohan,
yeah,
unfortunately.
yeah. They don't have any horns, and they don't sound cool, but
They do look cool. I will give them that.
yeah, yeah, sure. We can give them. They can maybe win in the how their models look category.
I mean, I don't know if they win over the Riders of Rohan in that category, but they certainly just objectively look cool.
Yeah, yeah, that's fair. That's fair.
So we are, of course, talking about the Imperial Riot Troopers. What's their actual card name? Did I get Riot
I
Control
think.
Squad?
Sorry. Yeah, there you go.
Yeah. So they got a preview article just recently, which was all stuff we knew very briefly.
I mean, it depends. It depends on how you feel about that. I'm not sure that that's a fair assessment of the article in its natural state and form.
there there was some brief drama where the wrong card image was in the article, and the card image that's the Sleeper Cell article. Sorry. The card image basically had them at 60 points and speed 1, which uh, look, obviously that's a mistake because that unit would be atrociously unplayable.
I mean, I'm not sure that's fair because it still is atrociously unplayable, but we can
It would
get
be
there.
even more atrociously unplayable. How's that?
Yeah.
Um, yeah, here, okay, here's the article. I don't know where that original image came from.
Yeah, we definitely haven't seen that image before, and they had already previewed the image of this card like at Adepticon, and it was the right one.
It was, yeah, it was the one where they're 50 points and speed 2. So I don't know where that image came from. If that was like a testing image or something that got uploaded. I'm flabbergasted that that version of the unit ever existed anywhere, and testing or otherwise. Uh,
Not
but
only did your editors not catch this, but you've been exposed.
yeah, right. Anyway, luckily that is not the stats of the unit. They do look sweet with their, as we noted, they have riot shields. They got the stun batons. There's a marksman dude. They have the awesome looking security droids. But yeah, the unit maybe not that great, which we'll get to. But let's talk about what it is real quick. So it is a stormtrooper unit, which means that they have red saves. They've got courage 1 and 1 health apiece. They've got speed 2. They have a E11 blaster rifle with a white dice, but they do not surge to hit. So their ranged attack is the same as a B1 unit, except of course they have 4 models instead of 6 base. So
Yeah.
that is,
And they're 14 points more expensive.
yeah. So that is a lot worse from a ranged perspective.
Yeah.
They do have a black dice in melee, which is suppressive, and because of their hold the line ability, that does surge. But all that really does is make them as good in melee as an old stormtrooper unit was, which is to say, like, slightly above average for a core unit, but not as good as an actual melee unit for the most part. They do have charge, and they
Yeah,
do,
great.
yeah, they have 2 heavy slots, which you can put the KX series security droids in, which gives you 2 security droid miniatures for 30 points. So that's basically 15 points a miniature. Those guys do have red dice in melee and also impact 1.
Uh-huh.
Uh, so that gives you 6 models
For 80
for
points.
80 points, which is the same as an arc unit.
I mean,
Uh,
let's not even compare it to an arc unit. Let's just like, I mean, I
okay,
don't know.
let's try and do apples to apples here. How about a fleet with a shotgun?
Yeah,
We get
I
a
think
good
that's
shot.
more fair. That it rolls 10 dice, pierce 1 in melee. And I'm pretty sure that probably comes in somewhere in the 65 point range. Maybe cheaper than that, actually.
It is 62. I want to. I'm bringing it up right now. 62.
Yep. So that's 8 white, 2 red, pierce 1. Obviously, like less good defensively, but
But not like that much worse.
no.
Especially considering, so if you take the 18-point difference, that would be a medical droid, right?
Yep.
So you add a medical droid onto the fleets. Now you have a 6 wound unit with surging white saves, which is 9 effective wounds,
Mhm.
plus 2 extra wounds, which, if you assume that you're applying that to surging white saves, is effectively 3 more wounds, which brings it up to 12, right? 12 effective wounds.
Yes, you're talking about effective wounds, so you're factoring in saves. Yeah, yep. Keep going.
Yeah. And the Riot Troopers, which is the same cost, 80 points for 6 models with a red not surging save, is also 12 effective wounds. So the same as a fleet unit, and your melee is either 4 black, 2 red, no pierce, or
8
what did
white,
we
2
say?
red, pierce
8
1.
white, 2 red, pierce 1. One of those things sounds a lot better to me. The fleet troopers also can shoot at range too, but that same pool.
Yeah, yeah. No, I'd look, I don't want to like rain on people's parade here, but this unit is just it's bad.
Yeah,
There's very few things in Legion when I've seen them immediately. I've been like, I'm never ever gonna put that on the table in its current incarnation. This is one of them. I don't know.
yeah, I'm struggling to see. I mean, they're competing directly in the same slot as Storms. Yeah, they're slightly better at melee, which, I mean, look, we've talked about the fact that Storms just have white dice in melee is a real problem for Empire lists now. I think that's still true. These guys are definitely not the solution.
Well, not only that, but I think that with how fast paced the game is now, like you can't afford to pay 80 points for a squad that can't shoot. Like, and this squad can't shoot.
Yeah, its dice are terrible.
It's gross. And like you gotta hit melee with this for them to be effective. And even then, like it's a high floor, low ceiling pool, I would say. Like, yeah, sure. 4 black, 2 red. I guess technically 5 black, 2 red if you take the marksman, which we can get to in a second.
Which would make it a 110 point unit.
Yeah. Like we're talking about you're throwing like 7 dice tops in melee. I hope that this is still misprinted, and like I think it would be completely within the realm of reasonability for this unit to have 2 black dice in melee per dude, and it would be fine at its current cost. It might be a little pushed at that point. I don't know.
Or at least like black white, right?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what this is. This is a unit that doesn't do much. I guess like it. I will say that this unit is probably decently sticky once it gets into melee, as long as your opponent doesn't have a lightsaber. Um,
Yeah, like one if you can actually get these guys there against other vanilla core units that are not fleet troopers, because fleet troopers will mince these guys.
oh yeah,
Um,
these guys are like the melee thing that's not good against all the other melee things. I don't know. I like
yeah,
Wookiees are gonna rip these things up. Like it doesn't. I don't know.
yeah, but even so, like if they're in melee with like rebel troopers, that's probably fine. B1s, again, probably fine. B2s, they're gonna get shredded. Uh, I'm trying to compare them to like other core units. I mean, vets and shores both also have black dice in melee, so that could be like I know these guys surge on their saves once they get into melee, but the chances of them taking casualties on the way in are pretty high. I mean, these guys are stormtroopers defensively, but they're much more expensive. So the chance that they take some casualties on the way in are high. I guess these riot shields aren't useful for blocking ranged attacks at all. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I want them to be good, and
Me too. They
because
look
the
awesome.
models look sweet.
Yeah.
And I just yeah,
Yeah.
the
I,
whole
I
I think at the end of the day, this package is just wait. Everything that comes in this box is like at least 10 points too expensive on its individual card, I think.
yeah.
Um,
At least possibly more.
I mean, I think once you're talking about like 40 points for the base squad, 20 points for the security droids, we're talking about like 60 points for for that package. Like
That's definitely more reasonable.
that's definitely that even might be like a little too cheap at that point. Like I don't know. Tough to say.
Yeah.
For a squad that's like melee only, you know, also doesn't have scout natively. The only way you can get him scout is recon intel. So, and you probably are going to have to take it because the squad doesn't do anything if it's not in melee. Um,
Yeah, no, that makes them even more expensive.
yeah, yeah. Um, I don't know. You compare this to like the sleeper cell, you know, that like the if you compare this unit with the security droids at 80 points against the 70-point sleeper cell unit, it's just like what is going on?
Yeah. Now,
Uh,
obviously, the sleeper cell is a special forces unit, but even still.
yeah, no doubt. I just like
Yeah, I think it's most fair to compare them to fleets because fleets are kind of their
a similar
thematic
similar
and
role. Yeah,
role and rank mirror. And the
sure.
fleets are just, I mean, I'd rather have fleets like 10 out of 10 times. And not
I
a
would
lot of
rather
people are
have
taking
fleets
fleets.
in Empire than this unit.
Yeah,
Yeah.
100%. So, yeah, I would hope slash expect for these guys to get a little bit of at least a points decrease or a little bit of a glow up at some point. They did say that these guys in Sleeper Cell were the reason that they have the old card art is because they were like the last, wave, quote unquote, or
It's
whatever
gonna
they
be
call
this
it.
is gonna be their out for fixing these guys. Is they're gonna be like, oops, yeah, we gotta drop a new card anyways, so we'll fix the
Yeah, hey,
points.
look, that'd be great. I would love for these guys to be good as a player that has played Empire with the new edition and been trying to put Empire lists together. Like I really struggle what to do with melee counters other than just taking Vader, which don't get me wrong, I love Vader. Vader's great. But it's very limiting from a
It's
list
the
building perspective.
it's the faction of Vader right now. What can we say?
It is. It's the Darth Vader faction, which look, maybe that's thematic, right? In the movies, it's the Darth Vader faction,
I
right?
mean, I don't know.
But
Republic might be still in that spotlight. I mean, depending on how you view that character, but yeah.
Anakin Skywalker is dead, Mike. Darth Vader killed him.
Sure. Whatever you say, Kyle.
All right. Do
um,
we need to talk about the marksman real quick? Because we didn't actually talk about the marksman.
I mean, I think we talked about the marksman a few podcasts ago, and we
Yeah.
talked about the rebel marksman. This upgrade is bad. Don't take it. I don't know what else to say.
Yeah, the action cost is super steep. It's super unreliable. If you can like actually land the effect, I'm
Eh.
not. Yeah, I'm not even sure that's worth the action cost.
Like the only there will be, I think, what I'll describe this action. It's like there is like a 2% of scenarios this action will be amazing. It will feel like it won you the game, and 98% of the time it will do absolutely nothing,
Yep.
and might actually be a drawback, because you're incentivized to, like, I think it'll kind of trick players that don't know better into doing something that's just strictly worse than moving.
Yeah.
um
And it also doesn't work when you're engaged, which is what this unit wants to be. So
yeah, it's bizarre. It's like, yeah, I would like to hold my charging unit back so that I can take a 25% chance to do one wound to something. uh,
yeah,
I don't know.
you know what I would like to see with these guys would be, keep basically most of the profile as it is. Maybe make them a little bit cheaper, but make Riot Control Squad like a subtitle for Stormtroopers so that you could actually take generic Stormtrooper heavies in this unit as well. And then, maybe don't give them two heavy slots. Make like the marksman a personnel, Riot Control Squad only upgrade so that you can't just use this as like, HRU 2.0. But, if they want to take like a Stormtrooper heavy, or make the security droids personnel slot, whatever. But, if they wanted to take a Stormtrooper heavy, like throw a DLT or T21 in here, and then that way they can kind of,
Flex a
not
little.
not totally suck at range while
Yeah.
still being sort of like a mediocre melee counter at the same time. Then that's kind of what stormtroopers are, right? They're not great at anything. They're not terrible at anything, and they're just kind of there. Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
that I think that would have been fine. Stormtroopers as the title, and then Riot Control Squad as the subtitle. Give them a heavy slot and a personnel slot, and make the marksman and the security droids personnel upgrades for the Riot Control Squad. I think that would have been fine. But anyway,
Yeah. I think, don't get me wrong, I don't mind the fact that some of that there's obviously caution being used
sure,
here.
caution is
Like,
good. Yeah,
I would rather them come in too low than way too high, um frankly. At
yeah.
least yeah.
I think that's broadly true. I don't know if you can say that that approach has been applied to everything.
No,
Is
no, no,
my
no, for sure, for sure. This
so
this seems to be a deviation from the
which
mean.
yeah,
uh
that betrays a lack of intentionality,
I
in my
agree.
opinion.
I would love to know why this stuff costs so much.
Yeah.
Like, I would love some insight there.
Like if
But
if Sleeper Cell was the same, where we're looking at and we're like, man, these guys are really expensive, then I think you could reasonably say like, okay, they were just being cautious. That's fine.
well, I do think that with the
But
marksman, that's probably true. I got to imagine that at
yeah,
some point these cards did not have like surge or crit on them. They had like hit or crit
yeah,
on them, or something to that
like Dins.
effect. Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. And I think
that
I
definitely would have been too much.
it definitely would have been, no doubt.
Yeah,
I but the points cost on these says to me that this is not what they were messing around with originally, and this is where they landed and decided to be cautious instead of pushing it.
yeah,
Which is
yeah.
fine. I don't think that is a great effect to have in the game anyways.
I agree. Yeah, it's
Uh,
not very interactive.
no.
You'd rather an effect like that specific to the marksman be terrible instead of good.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, that was Riot Control Squad. So we're going to talk next a little bit. We kind of teed up this topic last week when we were talking about Rebels, but we're going to talk a little bit about Turn Zero in the battle deck.
Yeah.
I don't know if this is going to be like a comprehensive, guide to battle cards, but it's going to be a discussion point. We're going to see how far it takes us. So the first question I have for you, Mike, is it better to win the roll off or lose the roll off to see who is blue player
Okay.
and
So,
why?
yeah. So I think this is a very complicated question.
Okay.
And I think that this is a question that is loaded in that I think the answer is it depends.
Okay, go on.
And to be more specific, I think when I say it depends until like the second that you roll the dice almost sort of situation. And that you're not going to know until you roll up to a table, which if you want to be blue or red.
Okay.
So I'm going to preface this with I haven't like completely fleshed my thoughts out on this, but I do have some like I think baseline places to start. I think we need to talk about some of the things that are inherently true about winning and losing the die roll. If you win the die roll, you start as blue player, which means you automatically have the table side pick, and you're going to be able to flip your primary or secondary, right?
Well, you start with the table side pick.
Yes, yeah. I'm getting there.
Yeah.
I just want to like cue us up into
Yep.
like the scenario that unfolds, and then we'll dive into the nuances, right?
Yep.
So you're going to get to pick your primary or your secondary, and I think this is the main juncture point in which you get to realize whether you wanted to be blue or red to begin with, and functionally, I think this what matters here is your objective deck the same or similar to your opponent's? Because if it's different, you're gonna rather be red player or like start as red player in this version
So that you can replace,
so that
guaranteed replace the primary with one of your primaries.
right. But if you're playing basically the same deck, I actually think that there are like some nuances here where you would rather have more of your things kind of like in play at the start. And you kind of like it allows you to potentially end up with more things that you want than your opponent has. But I think a lot of this centers around the two lists that kind of get brought into the picture at the start and who is. I think the way I've sort of started to think about Legion is that with a couple exceptions, one person has like a baseball bat at the beginning of the game and the other person's like trying to run away
Okay.
from getting just shot off the table, unless it's a mirror match. And I think that if you are trying to kind of like overpower your opponent, just putting more objectives into play earlier is better. And if you're trying to avoid the fight, being red is better.
Is avoiding the fight even like a real option for success?
Yes, I have
Okay.
come to the conclusion that that is true. But I think that this also falls into, I think that there is, the lists with the club tends to bring certain objectives, and the lists that are trying to avoid the fight tend to bring different objectives.
Can you talk about which ones those are just for context here?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think the ones that are trying to look for the fight are playing close the pocket, bunker assault, and then generally they're playing either recover the research or shifting priorities. Probably recover the research. Lists that are trying to avoid the fight or split the fight up into multiple areas that they can maybe prevent their opponent from overwhelming them in are trying to play breakthrough, intercept, and then recover or shifting depending on preference. So I
So
kind of see this as like close the pocket and bunker assault in one kind of skew, breakthrough and intercept in the other, and recover and shifting can kind of like, depending on your list, be fit into either category.
so basically you're talking about primaries where the fight can be or is very concentrated in one spot versus those where it is spread out, basically.
Yeah. I would describe the lists that bring a club to the table as like, I would like all my stuff to be all together. These tend to be Republic or Imperial lists at this juncture. They tend to bring like pretty solid hammers and Vader and Anakin and a bunch of very powerful units like dewbacks or arcs to back them up. And I would put the other stuff, like rebels and I don't know, separatists are kind of weird. They can kind
Yeah.
of flex to either side of this equation, depending on if they're in on B2s or in on Geonosians or B1s or whatever. But the lists that don't like being shot at because their stuff just dies would much rather split the fight than have to fight in a place where they can't avoid the main fight. I think a lot of the primary objective stuff hinges on trying to float your opponent's main pieces kind of in places, getting them stuck in places where they're not as relevant.
And the primaries where you're splitting up, that gives you a better chance to do that because there's more places where things have to be relevant.
Yes, and you can sometimes strand their like really important piece in a position where like if they move out of that position they're like not scoring an objective for that turn or whatever, depending on what it is. To bring this all kind of full circle, I think in the situations where one person is skewed towards the close the pocket bunker assault and the other person is skewed towards intercept and breakthrough, you really want to be red player in that scenario so that you can make sure that you are determining like the primary objective is the one you want to play because if you don't get the one you want to play, you're not really getting to play your game. In a situation where you're playing similar decks, I think it matters a lot less, and I think just having blue player at the start and making your opponent blow bans on taking blue player away from you for table side is way better.
But so playing devil's advocate here for that second point, I definitely agree that if you have different primary decks, that it's better to be red so that you can basically guarantee that you're using your primaries.
Yep.
But if your decks are basically the same,
well, here's the catch, right? Here's the catch. If they're the same, you're basically just playing a game of fish for advanced intel. And if you're fishing for if you're taking the table side, you can't be fishing for intel or banning your opponent's intel.
Okay. So basically it's all about, if your decks are the same, it's all about advanced intel.
Oh yeah, 100%. Not close. And table side, which one person starts with in this situation. And if you don't start with it, you have to waste one of your intel bans on getting it.
If the table is sufficiently skewed such that
if it matters, right? If it's like a table that is like fairly similar and it's kind of a wash, it just becomes a who can get to advanced intel and who can ban their opponent's advanced intel, right?
Yeah, I hate it when I flip that one over first.
I don't know. I like sometimes I don't mind it because like again, if you're blue player and you have table side and you flip advanced intel in the first slot and you have like a really sweet objective, they can't ban all three of those things.
No, but if they don't care about the objective because they're playing a similar list,
yeah, no doubt,
then yeah, they just because you're not going to ban your own advanced intel, right?
Right. Well, but this is also where like there are some situations where you are playing those opposite list types and you just flip advanced intel immediately, and all of a sudden you know, they're not blue player, they're playing an objective they don't want, and you have advanced intel, and they can't really deal with all three of those things at the same time.
Yeah. So I think we threw this stat out maybe like 2 weeks ago,
Mhm.
but just for context, they do have stats in Longshanks about like win rates by which advantage you got, etc. And advanced intel was what, like 60%?
It was 63% last time I
Okay.
checked, and all of the rest were, I don't think
Below
any
50.
higher than 46.
Yeah.
So it just like having advanced intel is a big deal.
I
Is a
mean, it's
huge
it's
deal.
crazy that an advantage card could provide that huge of a difference. I mean, anecdotally, it makes total sense because when you get that card, it makes a massive difference.
Well,
But
and when you get that card, I actually think it increases the likelihood you should play standing orders by like a lot.
yeah,
uh, because all of a sudden you could be going 2 to 3 times after your opponent if you like lose the roll off turn one.
yeah,
Um, and I think just to kind of like go back to like the primary objective situation, I think that also speaks to the difference in objectives. Like being able to go 3 times after your opponent with advanced intel, and also being on like breakthrough or intercept signals where you have to split your army. If your opponent doesn't know where 2 or 3 of your units are by the time they've deployed their entire army, they are at a huge disadvantage on those objectives. If you're on bunker assault or close the pocket or even recover or shifting, like you can sort of flex your stuff in those situations. It's, don't get me wrong, it's still a little hard,
yeah.
but if you're able to deploy 3 units after your opponent on breakthrough, you're, I'm just gonna like toss a number in the air, like 80% to win that game, I think, because you can just load boxes in the way that you need to, and your opponent can't deal with it.
Right. Because you can essentially practically guarantee that one of those two objectives is going to be scored by you and not contested,
Yes.
or at least like minimally contested.
And often like the last 3 units you're deploying are like Bad Batch or and like your other 2 power units,
Right.
regardless of like what faction you're playing. Like half the factions in the game are playing Bad Batch right now. Like,
Yeah.
you know, it's not just you get to deploy 3 units after your opponent. It's you get to deploy the three most
The three most
important
important
units.
units. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, but in fairness, I would love to see, I think advanced intel, while its win percentage is stupid high, I do think it is the power level and advantage should be.
They should all be
That
like that.
that I would
Yeah.
like advantages to feel that powerful. The other ones, like somebody commented in the comments on the YouTube video uh last week about like, oh, how could they not matter? Advanced intel is so good. I think you're right. I just like all the other ones literally feel like they do nothing. Like I okay, you know,
Yeah.
if cunning deployment like came with a built-in vigilance, like maybe,
Yeah.
you
If you could
know,
carry those dodges over to turn two, it'd be a lot more
yeah,
relevant.
yeah.
Fortified, more cover. Eh, okay, I guess.
It doesn't matter. It like
No.
straight up doesn't matter.
Now, if it was like, select three of your units, those units gain low profile this game, that'd be totally different. But
I think if fortified, I think could have been put 3 barricades on the table. Barricades provide red save cover. Like that would be
yeah,
that would be like, whoa, okay, we'll take a step back here and talk
yep.
about it, sort of situation. Um,
That would be
Obviously,
neat, by the way, if anything, provided red save cover.
yeah, I'm not saying that that's balanced. I haven't tested it. I
Yeah.
haven't tried it out. Whatever.
That would be more on the
It
power
may.
level that seems appropriate for an advantage.
Yes, I think
Yeah.
so. And maybe it's not. You get 3 barricades. It's like you get one or something. Like I don't know. Um, but
And
yeah,
the other three just seem kind of actively terrible. Garrison is definitely actively terrible. That's the prepared position one.
I think Garrison is definitely the worst one. I think strafing run is also, I think, just bad. Like you should never touch it. Because ordnance does basically the same thing and has a much better hit rate. Strafing run is like you have to draw a line, and it's actually kind of awkward and weird, and it doesn't do wounds to things that are armor. Ordnance covers an entire POI,
Right.
which is actually like in the right situation a relevant effect, right?
Yeah,
Like
for the suppression in particular.
I found it was really weird. Josh has been playing his like Vader Dewback list. He's been running ordnance because like he's like, well, coding and deployment in fortified positions does nothing for me anyways. I might as well play a card that maybe can combo with
Yeah.
Master of Evil, right?
Uh,
I'm like, okay, fair enough. But it turns out ordnance does damage to dewbacks.
right, because they have armor one.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah, that actually like really messed him up in one of our games. And
Yep.
I was like, I didn't even realize it until he was like, he put an ordnance token down to like get my ATRTs to not score. And then we realized it was gonna die to his dewbacks were gonna die to his ordnance token. So I think ordnance is like I think ordnance, cunning deployment, and fortified position all fall within the like, meh, these are fine. They're like they don't really do anything, and some of them have chances to maybe do something. Um, advanced intel, though, that's where the money is. Just print me the advanced intel. So I just wish I could put 3 of them in my deck.
Yeah, I mean, it breaks the foundational concept of the game, which is that you could have more activations than your opponent and still be able to pass.
You can have more activations than your opponent and still be, yes, 100%. It also introduces situations where you could have less activations of your opponent and potentially go after they do.
Right.
They're totally done.
Yep.
I think in order for that to be true, that I'd have to do the math on that. It's definitely possible, but you got to kind of engineer the situation.
Yeah. Either way, it's real good. Should we
Yeah.
talk about the secondaries real quick?
Sure. Yeah. Where do you want to start?
I mean, we can just kind of talk about them generally. When I'm looking at secondaries, I feel like a lot of these just kind of reward you for doing stuff that you want to be doing anyway. There's definitely some nuances to some of these, like marked targets. You probably don't want that if you have a bunch of cheap, easily killable units. Um, you know, bring them to heal. If you have a suppression based list, you probably have a slight advantage in that one.
I'm gonna be honest.
Um,
I have found that bring them to heal always results in me killing the stuff I'm trying to like panic
Yeah.
before I score the thing, and it's really annoying.
Yeah.
Um,
Panicking a unit is actually pretty difficult simply because stuff just dies before it gets enough
yeah.
suppression tokens.
Um, you definitely have to have like suppressive keywords if like that's what you
Yes.
want to be doing.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Recon mission certainly benefits if you have like an Anakin or a Vader where you've got a single unit that's durable that wants to be in the middle of everything anyway.
Yeah. I definitely my go-to 3 are mark targets, sweep and clear, and recon mission.
Yeah.
I think those are what I'm looking for in a secondary is consistency. And I think bring them to heal, enemy base, and surface scan all can put you in situations where your opponent can sometimes box you out of scoring.
Or score some surprise victory points that maybe you didn't have, that you weren't planning for.
Yes. And I think overall, I also think there are some like weird primary secondary combos that I think you probably want to avoid. Like for instance, mark targets and intercept signals. not a combination you want to play, because they're just going to mark your objective units for the primary.
Yeah.
And it gets really awkward very quickly.
Yep.
Um,
Also, can we talk about tracking this stuff real quick? So,
sure.
um, just logistically, I'm actually not at this point sure what the official way to do this is because I've already gone straight to an impromptu solution
Yeah.
because it's easier. So basically what I do for all this stuff, mark targets, intercept, anytime you need to like designate a unit for something, is I have little bracelet kit rubber bands that I just put around like the necks or arms of the minis, the unit leader.
Mhm.
And then I just travel around the table because a lot of these, even if they have like an objective token that is claimable associated with them, it doesn't actually exist on the table until the unit dies.
For some of them, yes.
Yeah. So it's really just like administrative to make sure you know which units are which, right? Am I like,
Um, I guess. I mean, I definitely have been using like objective and condition tokens to market personally. Um, I haven't run into. I know I haven't run into this being like a super big issue.
yeah, it just seems like it's a lot of tokens on the table that don't actually, like, it's confusing to people because they don't actually take up space or they're not supposed to. And like, they don't exist on the table itself until the unit leader dies.
Yes, that is foundationally true.
Yeah.
And
So,
many of them don't exist on the table even after the unit leader dies,
right.
like the mark
Mark
targets
targets.
or
Yeah.
the intercept signals.
Yeah. I just feel like it's awkward to have actual cardboard on the table when it's not really there. But how people want to do it is how people want to do it. But I'd be curious to hear people's opinions on if they feel like it's acceptable to use rubber bands or some other method to mark the units in question versus cardboard tokens, which can get a little busy, in my opinion. Especially when you have
Yeah,
like more than one of these going on at a time.
I mean, this definitely falls in the like, um, I don't know. We've got a bunch of things that we don't actually have physical components for
Yeah.
situation, on the, half range ruler and stuff like that. I don't know. I think rubber bands are a great way to do that.
Yeah. I also find they're great for squad differentiation if you have a bunch of units that look the same. Because you can put them around each guy in the unit and they're not getting in the way of anything. Anyway,
Yeah.
any further turn zero / battle card thoughts?
I think a lot of what we've said today so far, like, kind of dances around deployment a little bit.
Okay.
Deployment is definitely the most fundamental portion of this game at this juncture. And basically, I mean, I don't think this is rocket science, but at the end of the day, your objective in turn zero is to make sure that your deployment is the most beneficial it possibly can be, right? Um,
And generally speaking, that means holding your important stuff until as late as possible, and or your stuff that can attack on turn one,
yeah,
which are
and
things like commandos.
yes, and also setting up situations where you can use your units that are deploying in situations that are advantageous to them, right? So like if you have units that are very fast and short range, breakthrough is a lot better than if you've got units that are slow and long range, right? And so I think when you're building your list and figuring out like what to ban and what not to ban, like you definitely want to take into consideration kind of the dichotomy between what you've brought and what your opponent has brought when you're, you know, If you're doing similar things, you want to focus more on banding to advantages and stuff, probably, or table side. If you're doing different things, you probably want to focus on banding objectives because they're going to matter more. Because you've got different ones. But at the end of the day, a lot of this comes down to making sure that you have the right the turn zero breakdown kind of lets you put your pieces in the right places. Because if you put your pieces in the wrong places, you will lose the game pretty much instantly.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things I've noticed most about 2.6 relative to Legacy Legion is that once you put a unit somewhere, you're kind of committed to that unit existing and affecting that part of the battlefield, and that's it.
Yep.
Because of how quickly things start to matter, you can't really like reposition after you've put a unit on the table. And I think that goes really for all of the objectives, including the
It definitely
ones,
does.
like close the pocket that have like clear places that you need to be, even close the pocket has objectives that are essential. Like you've got your middle one, right? And then you've got the two on the opposite sides, and you kind of have to decide which of those two like secondary primaries, which of those two 1 point POIs you're going to deal with. And you have to decide that during deployment. And if you mess that up, like you can't really reposition to the other 1 point POI.
Well, yeah, and like in that situation, like if your opponent then deploys like opposite you on the same side of the table, like what do? Right? Like,
Yeah.
do you then kind of sacrifice that unit and start deploying your army on the other side of the table, or and in the hopes that they don't do the same thing, or like it gets a little awkward.
Yeah, because essentially you're I've found 2.6 to kind of be like playing on two separate 3x3s. And you kind of have to decide in a lot of cases, like when you're deploying a unit, which of those two 3x3 table sections they're going to impact.
Yeah. And this is kind of where like thinking about the game, I think in like, am I the hammer or am I the person that's running away is important. Because if you're the hammer, you're going to mirror your opponent's objective and just try and slam them as hard as possible.
Yeah.
If they're the hammer, you don't want to do that. And
Yeah.
you're going to try and like go to the other deployment zone and try and make sure the fight doesn't happen immediately, right? And I think a lot of games are won and lost in that step
Yep.
at this juncture. As we're like figuring out what lists are good and all that jazz, and maybe waiting for some points adjustments that are direly needed.
Yeah.
You know, I think that's a big step and stage in the turn zero process. I think when the day comes, obviously that isn't here yet, that we have maybe double the possible turn zero capabilities that has been kind of like foreshadowed and alluded to. I think being red player or losing the roll off is going to be way more important than it is right now.
Yeah.
I feel like right now we're sort of in that stage where we were with like when Legion just came out and there were only 4 cards in each category and you could only bring 3, but like you were all like we were all playing the same objectives no
Yep.
matter what sort of situation. And we're sort of in that a little bit. It's a little bit more diverse than that, but not by much.
Yeah.
And like old Legion, as new variables get introduced and the pool of potential things is going to increase that you can bring, I think that is going to matter just so much more, like way
Yeah.
more than it ever has.
Yeah, and that makes me a little nervous because there's no way to exercise any agency over whether you control that variable or not.
I mean, it's already
Um,
like I think maybe too much. I think that's maybe up in the air, and maybe we need to like wait on statistics and stuff. But there are definitely factions that like rebels can't really play bunker assault.
yeah,
You know, like
I wish that Longshanks tracked not just red and blue player, but actually who won and who lost the roll off?
You can, so fun thing about Longshanks, I'm pretty
Uh-huh.
sure anybody can do this, but they have like a suggestion box
Okay.
functionality that if there's a thing you want Longshanks to do, you can go on there, and I think you got to log in, and you can like drop it in the thing, and rather than it just like, yeah, going in the suggestion box trash can like at work, you they put it up for the community to vote on all the suggestions, and there's like a suggestion page, and the things that are the highest that get like the most upvotes on that list are the things that they address. And by address, it sounds like they either are like, no, we're not going to do that, or this is now like the highest thing on our
Okay.
priority list sort of situation.
Well,
um
well, listeners, go out there and suggest that they add a way to track who won and who lost the roll off for stat reasons.
um yeah, it is like a little weird because like that's really just, I don't know, uh theoretically I still think that should probably be like 50-50. I don't know. um
I think it should be. I'm not sure that it. I don't know. I don't know if the perception currently is that it is. Regardless of what we said here in the last 30 minutes, I think that currently the perception, at least in the competitive community, is that it's better to lose the roll off. For the reasons you
yeah,
stated, it's not clear to me that that's the case.
yeah,
But
I definitely think it's less black and white than the competitive
yeah,
community like presently thinks it is. I do think that in a situation where players' skill is also heavily skewed, I do think being losing the roll off is a pretty big deal.
yeah,
Um, because I do think that like a lot of people I've played kind of just like fumble around in turn zero and don't really know what they're trying to achieve right
hmm
now, which sometimes allows you to just like ban stuff for free and just like get a bunch of stuff that you wanted, even though you shouldn't be getting it. Like the advantage of winning the roll off is that you have control of 3 of 5 categories from the jump.
yeah. It's interesting. I know that one of their stated objectives with sort of overhauling the turn zero process was to reduce the outcome of the game based on differences in skill that could have. I don't
Yeah.
I don't think that they've made it more random, but I also don't think that they've actually accomplished that.
No, I don't think so either. And I think I dare say it is easier to lose the game by bringing the wrong objectives before bans even start than it ever has been.
Yeah. I feel like with at least the old process, the way vetoes worked, even if you like didn't have a full grasp on what you were doing, particularly if you weren't using your deck, you could still kind of use the vetoes in a way that like mitigate like made a bad situation less bad for you.
Yeah.
I think now it's just so much less obvious what that even looks like or how you do that.
Well, and heaven forbid you just like you like don't understand what is good and what is not good for you in the battle deck situation. Like if you're
Yeah.
a rebel player and you like packed bunker assault and close the pocket, which I have seen
hmm
like a lot of, frankly, you banning the primary isn't even helpful.
Right.
Like it's just like it's negative. like
Yeah.
it's net like you're just toast in that compartment. So like I definitely think there's like a component to it where obviously that's a player skill thing, no doubt, right? But it's like if you brought the wrong objectives with your list, you might just have lost the game before the
Before you roll
coin
any
flip
dice or
has
flip any cards.
yeah,
Yeah.
like even happened. Um so I definitely think, again, if you're playing a more fragile list, you got to avoid those confrontation objectives. Um, That's like a big deal. And like, I do think that that's like part of the stats and stuff that we're seeing right now with, the more fragile factions losing, is that I think the objectives that are, I'm going to put this in air quotes, easier to play because they're just like put all your shit in the middle of the table and slam, are more, I'm learning the game friendly.
Yep.
And like I don't have to like, it requires a lot less thought than like splitting up your army into 2 and/or 3 pieces. I've played like, I don't know how many games, like at least 50 at this point. It's still tough.
Yep.
It is not easy. Um, to do it in a situation where like I at the end of deployment, I'm like, I'm 100% happy with this. Like it doesn't happen. I'm like, I don't know about this.
Yep.
And I think that's part of the intent. Um, but to ask people to like understand that that's what they need to do and also expect them to do it well and bring a list that's suited for it, I think is a tall ask.
Yep.
So anyhow.
Turn zero still important, still hard.
Yeah, yeah, very much so.
More random, still important, still hard.
More random. Yeah. You know, yeah, it's weird. I wish that there was a way that we could like see how like the old turn zero and new turn zero, like the percentage of effect they had on winning or losing the game. Like that's obviously a variable like we can't really track. I f-
Well,
I
you
feel
could
like
you could track old red and blue, which
I get
in
I guess sorry.
which was close to 50-50 at the tail end of Legacy. Really, since they did the 4-card flip, it was very close to 50-50.
That's fair. Um, I guess that's not really what I mean.
You mean like if there's a skill gap, how how much was the game decided before it started versus
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah. And like that's like a very abstract
yeah,
concept, I feel
it
like.
is.
And it's like it's one of those things that's like
There's not a
this
way
is
to
it's
stat that.
this is more of a feel than
Yeah.
a we have like a hard concrete number for. Um
You'd almost have to do like this elaborate analysis where after turn zero, you had each player like pick who they thought was going to win, and then you'd have to compare that to the actual result, and then basically weight their opinions by like their elo rating or something.
Yeah, yeah. It would be very difficult, I think,
Yeah.
to actually get something that's like useful and like
Uh,
like credible.
yeah.
Um, but but I don't know. It's just like an interesting like thought exercise. Um,
Yep.
for sure.
All right. Any final thoughts?
Uh no, I don't think so. I think I've said everything I want to say today. I think that there are a lot of changes that we could like suggest for the turn zero process. Nobody's listening to us, so it doesn't matter anyways.
Yep.
But again, I think the bones here are like really great. Um, in that like I think the objectives and secondaries and the idea of advantages and everything is a cool design space to work within. Uh, yeah. So and it's been fun exploring these 18 new ones.
Yep. Maybe we'll get faction specific advantages eventually.
I don't think it's a maybe. I think it's already been confirmed by Will Schick
Oh,
on
really? Okay.
multiple interviews.
Well, that'd be great.
You know, I hope they're as good as advanced intel,
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
or at least,
Hopefully they're more balanced against each other than the current advantages are.
yeah. And I guess we'll see. But I also like. I think a strong part of how I feel about turn zero right now is colored by the fact that Republic is just pooping on everything, and it's hard to divorce that
Yeah.
from the rest of the game.
Yeah.
So
It's yeah, agreed.
it's hard to divorce that fact from like the balance of the game in general. Like, would Rebels be fine if Republic wasn't like such a heater straight out of the thing? Maybe. I don't know, you know.
Yeah, when you have a big balance issue like that, it really clouds everything else.
Yeah, and I'm not even convinced that the like solution to Republic is like a points balance issue. Like, obviously, yes, you could just make everything more expensive, and that would like solve like 70% of the problems or whatever. But I also think that like you also need to do it in a way that like doesn't make Republic players feel like their lists are like completely toothless after you jack up all their stuff by 20 points. You know, like
Yeah.
I think, I don't know. I think that's a hard one because all of a sudden, if you take like 2 squads out of every Republic list, all of a sudden snipers are a real problem.
Yeah.
I don't know. So I do think it's more complicated than just straight points balance stuff.
Yeah, I agree.
Um,
All right, Nerf Republic.
Let's start at Nerf Anakin, and then we can get into tempted needs to go.
Yeah, tempted.
Tempted's really, yeah.
All right. Well, we are the Notorious Scoundrels, and Kyle.
I am Sauron, and I will see you all in Eregion.
Maybe.
Maybe.
All right. Stay fresh, cheese bags.